Hi everyone, welcome to Splitting Hairs. Hello girls, today we have a discovery. Annabel discovered somebody very exciting, the wonderful Jennifer Hankin, aka the Emerald Ruby. Annabel, how did you find this treasure?
Instagram. That's where everyone is. It's just had this wonderful person keep commenting and liking and following our videos, and then I was like, I'm going to check out your page, and discovered you're a flautist and you're in New South Wales, and then we just got chatting, and then the interview, it just happened. Like, it was just set this up, and Jen, you've got some really, really interesting points which we'll get to later. That we thought.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, we thought it was just really appropriate for what we do, and we do casual conversations, so perfect.
Yes, especially the combination of the contemporary aspect mixed in with the classical. So why don't you take us back to the beginning?
Okay, I'm going to go right back to the beginning because I have a thing that my mum is never allowed to live down. I first started playing the flute when I was 10, after I'd spent 4 years begging my mum for a flute. She originally had me learning piano, and I was like, I hate this. This is horrible. Then I was like, I want to learn the flute. And she said, oh, you'll do it for a term. I'm just going to buy a cheap one that's going to fall apart. And now here I am at 28, freshly 28 yesterday.
Ooh. Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. So I've been playing since I was 10, and it has been a whole roller coaster of a ride. I did all of my AMEB exams as a good little classical musician does, and then I went to uni. I was like, I'm going to be an orchestral musician, because that was kind of the only path presented to me during my training. And then halfway through uni, I was like, I kind of don't want to make the sacrifices I would have to make as a flautist to go down that route. And then I just went.
What did you think those sacrifices were at the time?
So a big one was having to leave Australia to study in Europe.
That's a big expectation for us, isn't it?
That's a later episode. Just yeah.
I like Australia. I like living here. I like that it's warm.
Oh yeah, I hear you.
And also from a financial point of view, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the big sacrifice. And also, like, in terms of Australian flute jobs in orchestras, I think there are like 14 full-time positions, which like, I think in terms of all the flautists who have ever existed, like, I would consider myself to be in the midst of all the professional flautists, but whether I am top 14 material, I don't know.
Well, think of tuba, there's like 5 jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, like, there just aren't jobs.
That's the reality of this kind of thing.
And so then what happened once you made that conscious, it sounds like it was a conscious decision that you weren't going to take that path. Did you have something alternative, or were you just lost? Like, what was happening there?
So I did have a pathway for a little while. I was in a band called Vanishing Shapes, and we did this, like, I've been describing it as progressive chamber music, so all instrumental. We composed together as, depending on what period of time it was, either a quartet or a quintet, and we funded that ourselves. And for a really long time, that was kind of the musical goal, to get that band off the ground, but that kind of never eventuated. As a lot of...
What stopped that from happening, Jennifer?
Money and opportunities.
Oh, always. Yeah. I know. It's really irritating.
We were self-funded, I think. Yep. Like, none of us were earning over the tax-free threshold.
Yeah.
And because we didn't really fit in a contemporary space or a classical music space, nobody wanted to support us. And I'm still not... Like, we broke up in 2019. It just kind of fizzled out because we were all exhausted. And I'm still devastated about it. I haven't really talked about it a lot. It's like a breakup.
Yeah, this country is a risk-free zone. People tend to only support things that they have a guarantee will do well, instead of being adventurous and supporting something new. And all these buzzwords like innovation are thrown around a lot, but I don't think people really understand what it means to support something truly innovative. That's very sad. And were you all from the classical world, or were you a sort of a mixed bunch?
So we were mostly classically trained. We all had that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? That heritage behind us. Not all of us were at uni to pursue classical music, but we'd all come from that background. So we had a very classical way of approaching things. Yeah.
Like writing notes on a page. So was it all written, or was
none
there
of
some
it was written?
Oh, none of it was written.
I mean, sort of from a tonal perspective, and also from a almost philosophical perspective. Like, we approached works, we did large form music, and we were always looking for texture and experimenting with rhythm and harmony in a very deliberate kind of way.
Right, so kind of like free improvisation but with structure.
Yeah.
So you would map out maybe a structure, and then each person would have a cue to do a particular thing. Well, that sounds incredible. It sounds like that's come from the English tradition of, you know, John Cale, Velvet Underground, instrumental music, but experimental, but not just random. So what happened in classical music was a bit too random after Schoenberg sort of broke everything apart. And then it was very hard to recover, well, what is contemporary classical music now? And I think what you were trying to do is probably the absolute essence of what it could continue to be. And then it's hard to support it because it's hard to define it.
It's
and it's hard to tell people what to expect.
It's sort of labelled like modern classical now. That's what I find. I've got a couple of pianist friends that are in the modern classical industry, and it's massive, but it's sort of like, unless it in the old-fashioned sort of mindset of classical, unless it fits under that umbrella, people are like, ooh.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, new music, atonal music. But it's
Like
really not that what you were trying to do.
People want resolution naturally. They don't even realise it. Why do they like that piece? Because it has that resolution to it. You know, or it's major, it's happy, it's kind of like this stuff to it. So if it doesn't have that, people, even non-musicians would be like, I just don't know what to do with that. So it's kind of hard to...
Could you describe what it sounded like? Like, could you compare it to something like a gig? What would be the experience for people? Because I want people to get back to being interested in this for you, because maybe you could pick it up again when, I don't know.
I mean, I hold, there's a little fantasy that I have that suddenly one of us happens across $1 million and then we get to do it again. So the lineup was flute, and I also doubled on vocals, double bass, classical guitar, and clarinet. And then we had a cellist and a violist for a little while as well. And I would describe the music as Shostakovich if he was a prog metal band.
It sounds like what was happening between the wars in Berlin, actually. You know, like, it sounds really awesomely experimental, but it'd probably be really amazing to listen to. I hope you get that band back together.
Thank you.
Annabel and I will do anything we can to promote it if you do get back together. All right, well, that was one of your dreams. Now, where did this Emerald Ruby persona come from? Let's talk about that, because that's absolutely beautiful. I've been, doing a little bit of listening before today, and it's divine. So tell us about that and what that means to you.
In 2013, also while I was at uni, I was very inspired by women sharing their outfits on the internet. So I decided I'm going to make a fashion blog, and it's going to be great. Through that process, I've learned the crafts of photography and videography. So those are a couple of things that I pursue outside of music. And And then in 2016, I was playing a festival with Vanishing Shapes and another band that I'm in, the Button Collective. It was a folk festival, and I had this idea in my head for like a singer-songwritery song. I'd never written any songs before, so I bought myself a ukulele and sat down and started to write songs. And I was like, well, I need a name to write songs under. I already have this brand that I've been working on. I'm just going to make the Emerald Ruby like my internet creative catch-all. And it's definitely become more of a catch-all as I've developed as an artist. As I mentioned, like I do photography and I do video. And all of it comes under the Emerald Ruby brand. And it's the same for my writing, like my music writing. There's the Emerald Ruby singer-songwriter kind of vein, and then there's the Emerald Ruby serious classical composer vein. And I have decided that these are all parts of me as an artist. Why do I have to have different project names? And why do I have to specialize within those projects? Like,
yeah, multifaceted by the sounds of it. It's really awesome. Like, why do you have to do one thing? You don't.
Yeah, I've definitely felt this pressure during my training to specialize, and that's just not who I am. I'm not a specialist. I am deeply passionate about a lot of things, and I wouldn't describe myself as a generalist either, because when I'm interested in something, I deeply pursue it, but I definitely want to do all the things, not just one of the things.
Yeah, wonderful. So when you get into something, you go, I won't use OCD, but you probably get into the real nitty-gritty depths of it rather than just giving up when it becomes a bit too awkward or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds totally awesome. I wish I could do that. I give up on things way too easily, and then I put them off, procrastinate.
The Easy Project, which would have been awesome.
There's so many projects that Annabel will have a tantrum about that I've given up on. So yeah, you have this particular way of thinking, which is more deep than perhaps the average person. So I guess this is a good time to talk about the other topic that we wanted to talk about today, and that is, you've mentioned the word disability quite a lot in our communication. Yeah. I look at you as a completely delightful, well-integrated person in society as far as I can see, but I do spend a lot of time with some crazies in my industry. So let's talk about disability from your point of view and how that looks to you.
Yeah. The well put together, like, functional person, it's all a lie. Doesn't exist, and that never really has existed. So I think it's in this setting, it's definitely appropriate for me to disclose my diagnoses. Something I'm trying to do is be the advocate I wish I had growing up. So I'm a late diagnosed autistic ADHD person, and I've also struggled with chronic mental health issues, depression, anxiety. And then there is also a physical side to this, which is yet to be diagnosed, because I am going down the physical health rabbit hole, which is complicated and never ending.
And often to do with the immune system and how that's such a rabbit hole, as you say, of one thing leads to another, Yeah. You don't know whether it's coming from here and making this bad, this is making this bad. Yeah, I know many people who have suffered in this way. So how have you... Okay, let's turn this towards music. How has music or your creative output helped or hindered your recovery or your healing? Let's talk about how all these different things that you do can help, or does it? Or do you think about it in terms of that? I'm
in a really complicated place with my mental health and there's a term that I'm looking for. It's gone, but like
your creative output.
Yeah, my ability to maintain a creative output. So, as a lot of musicians do, my teaching pays the rent, and my creative stuff just kind of gets pushed to the side. And I found myself in this endless cycle of extreme productivity, then a huge burnout crash, and then a slow climb back to unhealthy extreme productivity due to the fact that I simply cannot sustainably maintain I'm gonna refer to my teaching as a day job because that's what it is for me.
Yep.
I cannot sustain a day job and a creative practice at the same time. It's impossible. And it's heartbreaking because I have reached a point where something has to give. And it definitely can't be my creative practice. There is something deep down inside me that drives this pursuit towards, I don't even know where it's going. I just have to make things, and if I don't, I feel deeply sad. But also, the day job can't give because I have to eat. I have to pay rent. I have to maintain my instruments. I have to be able to put money towards trying to further my career so that one day I can hopefully live off my creative output.
This is what we spoke about in not the last episode, the one before.
So many episodes.
Which is just the notion of, okay, you have to think differently outside of the box and be creative with wanting to be in the artistic performance world. You know, I have a couple of close friends of mine that I've seen go down the performance track, and then the reality of paying bills and saving for a mortgage, like paying off mortgage and stuff, means they now have to put, say, a full-time teaching first. And for some of them, and they're happy, so this isn't a negative thing, but for some of them, it's been that dream of a performance is sort of faded so that they can continue this teaching. And I saw that for myself and said, I don't particularly want that. So I don't really want to teach and let that overtake my life, because if I get burnt out from teaching, I don't even want to practice myself. So it's like, I have to turn things around and go, what can I do that gets me an income, that doesn't burn me out, that I can still pursue music and other things. So I had to get creative in that sense. And I've seen it in people be for a positive. Their priorities shift and they're doing really well. Some of them, it's a different story, but it's just the notion of, you don't finish uni and you don't walk into a full-time orchestral job. Some people do, and that's incredible, but it's not like that for everybody. So the reality is we're not taught that at uni, and we have to figure that out along the way, and you have to prioritize. Like, paying bills has to be the top priority.
Yeah.
And you have to figure
and on that topic of what Annabel says, you were, when Jennifer, you said before you were encouraged to specialise. What did that actually look like? So why did you feel that you were being encouraged to specialise? Because I know what you're saying is true, but it is really hard to pinpoint it. It's not like someone walked up to you, the Dean of Music, and said, you must specialise. What is that insidious background radiation of, you have to choose this and not that? Where does that come from in universities, do you think? And why? What advice would you give, since you were wanting to be the advocate you never had? What advice do you give to students who feel that weight of what you were talking about before?
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing within academic music. So I studied at Newcastle Conservatorium, and the year I went, they decided that you could no longer major in 2 instruments. They would allow you to major in composition and an instrument, but it also wasn't encouraged. And everybody thought I was a bit, I was overstretching because I was majoring in an instrument and composition. And within it wasn't ever explicitly said to me that I had to specialize, as you said, Sarah. but it was listening to the lecturers talk to each other and other students. It was just kind of assumed that you would study certain things and then curate your post-university degree to follow this pathway. And the only way to follow that pathway was to become more and more specialized. I think I did an honours as well, as a lot of people do. Miserable time. Wouldn't recommend it. And the pressure to specialize from the person who was like overseeing the honours students was huge. It was, well, you have to specialize because you've got 10,000 words to write on a very special topic. If you don't, then you simply won't pass the subject.
Yeah, you just won't pass. Yeah. So an awful lot of energy goes into a tiny little slice of what you could be doing. So it would be implied that being in a band would be a waste of time. Writing pop songs would be a waste of time. Playing in other groups would be a waste of time because you've just got to do this tiny little thing.
I mean, when I got into my first year of one particular uni, I sort of saw it as, right, okay, there's a certain slice of the cohort that are up there, like playing what I called like the university game. And I went, I'm not in that culture. It's not me. And I just went, I'm going to take what I can get out of uni, which was meeting some, the right kind of people, taking up opportunities that I thought would help me. But I wasn't going to go do that. That wasn't me. And once I realized that, I went, right, I need to look at where I can make up my own opportunities or take them if they come along, meet the right people, do it, leave. Because I was, like a lot of students, totally burning out.
Yeah.
Semester to semester, year to year. And it was just like, and I remember when I was studying at the University of Tasmania, one of the head of music, or one of the heads of instrument families, was every semester she would say you need to look after your mental health every single time, because you don't notice that you get from week 1 to 7, you have all these assignments, your performance recitals coming up, suddenly swap back and you're like, what's happened? And then you realize you are on a downward trajectory, and it's really hard because every point in a degree matters to get you that certain grade, to get you into postgrad, so on. So it's like, it's 3 to 4 years of just like stress that, is it legitimate? I don't think it is.
I also don't think it is. And I'd really like to talk on that. So I mentioned I was late diagnosed autistic. I was diagnosed in 2018 at the age of 25. At least I think that's how old I was. It was time ago. So my whole university degree, I didn't realize I was autistic, which meant that I didn't realize I needed disability accommodations. I had to choose between doing well in performance and doing well at the rest of my degree. Obviously, I was there to learn the art of performance, so I chose performance. And every semester, my performance mark would either be the top or the second top, and the rest of my marks would be barely passing.
Mediocre to low. And
not realizing that, 1, I needed disability accommodations, and 2, that they were available to me even without the autism diagnosis. Like, my depression and anxiety would have been enough to get them. It would have been a game changer for me. Yeah.
What made you first realise you needed to go and get tested for something? What was the last straw for you? You're like, nah, this isn't working. I have to go and get tested.
The last straw happened a long time before I was able to get tested. The last straw came when I was in year 10. And I found myself outside of the school counsellor's office like every week, just in tears, not coping with anything. And from that point on, I maybe saw like 6 or 7 different psychologists, and I kept saying to them, it's not just depression, it's not just anxiety. There is something else deeply wrong here that is not getting better, because I keep going to therapy to get help.
It's not an attitude problem either. It's not that you weren't trying.
And I think there's this attitude with mental health advocacy groups that you simply, if you're having a tough time, you reach out and then it's going to get better. I have found that in my experience, that is not the case. There are a lot of barriers to reaching out. The government gives you, if you're having a tough time, you get 10 subsidized mental health sessions. Often there is a $50 to $100 gap to access those sessions. And if you're deeply struggling, 10 sessions in a year isn't enough. And then the second thing is, if your problem is more than just a surface level problem, the medical health system will fight you at every level to get that support. It's something that I'm currently going through now with trying to access the NDIS. I got approved for the NDIS a couple of years ago, and they lost me in the system multiple times. And then from a musical point of view, there are no disability music services.
Really?
Yeah. So I was seeing a disability career coach for a little bit because I need a new job. And she had no understanding of how the music industry functioned or where I wanted to go or how to build up the things that I need to build up. Which was really upsetting because I can only access disability services. I can't access like another professional, or at least not at the moment, because I haven't figured out how the NDIS works. And the disability arts body in Australia, they're primarily focused on visual arts, which is great for visual artists, kind of sucky for everybody else. And when I did reach out to them, they told me, we can't help you, and then peer pressured me into applying for a round of funding, which I had said multiple times I did not want to apply for, and it has had 6 months worth of mental health, like negative mental health consequences for me.
Applying for funding has negative mental health consequences for all people who try and apply for funding.
Yeah.
That emotional roller coaster, that academic nature of it, the language that you have to speak to apply.
Yeah.
And then there's absolutely no guarantee of getting
well,
absolutely no.
I just missed out. The feedback I got was, your application was great, but we just didn't choose you.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
It's like such a rabbit hole of things, because we think of like disability help or anything, and then you think musicians on top of that. It's just sort of like, where do we fit in this kind of context, and what services are available, and like I'm almost speechless at just sort of like, I just don't know that it's just such a massive like kind of like topic, and everything. It's just sort of like.
And you look, I'm going to use some words I'm not allowed to use.
Go for it.
You look normal to me. You look functioning. You speaking perfectly fine. You're an incredibly creative person. You very snappy dresser. You've got plenty of online things going on. You've got a band camp. You've got, have you got a Patreon?
Not yet. Kind of. I've got a Patreon with one of my projects, but I don't have a Patreon yet.
Okay, got it. Well, so there are many ways for people out there listening to this interview to support you. And I encourage you to go grassroots. I encourage you to ignore the major funding bodies and the government as much as you possibly can, and see if you can get some local assistance. I mean, did I just become I think I'm about to become your Patreon, but I ran out of time because this interview got in the way. So I'm about to become your Patreon, and I encourage everyone out there to listen to the music, or don't. I don't care. Don't listen to her music. What do I care? I've listened to the music. It's great.
It's really
I'm going
great.
to become a Patreon if I can. If what's the Patreon for the particular project?
Yeah, so I have a Patreon with my covers duo. We're called Twin Willows, and pre-COVID, we tried to upload weekly covers to the internet. It's pretty fun. We make fun arrangements of pop music in a folk style, ukulele,
Great.
2 vocals and a flute. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm in. What's it called?
Twin Willows.
Twin Willows.
Yes.
Writing it down now. Twin Willows on Patreon, everybody. So what I was saying about how you look normal to me. So that's unfortunate. A high functioning person is not a priority in a lot of people's eyes. And it's almost like you sometimes would get discriminated against for
being high functioning.
For being high functioning.
Yeah.
Like you don't need help. Someone else needs more help than you. But yeah, so maybe we need to look at this a little bit differently. Maybe you need to, as I've always said, try and support those closest to us. Don't just assume someone's okay. Like really check in to see if someone's okay. What else can we do for you? In an ideal world, what else would you like to see in this society that helps people like you get a little bit ahead like you deserve, like everyone deserves?
The big things I can think of are musicians with disabilities need to talk about it. I feel like there's kind of there still is a stigma in wider society, but particularly in the musical places I found myself. A lot of people don't want to talk about mental health struggles, especially if they're teaching, because what if you're deemed not to be able to look after children correctly? You don't often see visible disabilities with music. And if your disability is invisible like mine, it's so easy to just pretend that you're normal and everything's fine and there's no issues here. The other one is there needs to be a disability music advocacy group that specifically provides opportunities for disabled musicians, both on stage and also with career support. I've just started paying for specialised career support, and it's very expensive, and it's something that a lot of my peers haven't had to do, but I can't afford not to because I'm useless without it, basically. The career coach that I see, she is an integral part of me getting anything done. I think as well, and this is a tricky one, and I don't have the solution, but there needs to be a better pathway than you work a day job and work on your music on the side until one day you've magically emerged as an artist and paid your dues and now you're successful. The term emerging artist just does my head in because I would consider that my skills are far above what you would consider to be an emerging artist, but my ability to get people to shows, make an income, and get opportunities is like right down the bottom of the music industry. When am I going to emerge as an artist? I mean, if you ask me, I have.
It sounds like when we say emerging artists, it goes back to that comparison of, well, we're comparing it to professional organizations in the country. It's like you might already be an artist, you might have emerged, but just not on their, you're not on their like platform, you're not
on their terms with
it's like we're comparing it to, okay, violinist, you've made it when you play in an orchestra. That's because you're comparing it to playing in an orchestra. You know, so it's very nuanced and just I totally.
Can I ask you, Jennifer, is one of your symptoms indecision disguised as procrastination, disguised as some people might criticize you for, I don't know, being airy or not being decisive enough?
Yeah, definitely in a way. It's called, within the autism community, it's referred to as autistic inertia. And for me, that presents itself in a real difficulty transitioning between tasks.
Right.
So,
Yep.
For instance, I am finishing off a few compositions at the moment, and if I don't have a full day to work on them with no interruptions, I can't do it.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely understand that.
Multitasking is a myth. We can't do it. Our brain can only focus on one, like 100% attention. It's a myth. You know, that's why they say when you're practicing an instrument, like no screens, because your mind is going to go, and it takes 20 minutes for you to flick off. You've just been on the computer, shut that down to go pick up your instrument. Your brain needs time to do everything. So it sounds like that's even more like alert for you in that sense. So,
and do you sometimes struggle with knowing where to start? Or is that part, you've got the idea, that's not the problem, it's that, go on.
Artistically, definitely not. I have too many ideas. There are so many ideas all the time. It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. From an administration and a career pathway point of view, definitely. The amount of times I have seen an opportunity, gone to start the application process, realize that the application is going to require me to do some really intensive writing, cried and quit. It's a consistent cycle I've found myself in. It's the same with trying to get any press for releases that I'm doing. It's the same for trying to put together collaborations as well. There are just all of these steps that people with regularly functioning brains don't even think about because they don't even see it as a step. But for me, it's like 20 steps. And
I got it. And each step takes more energy than, let's say, me. But having said that, Annabel, you said multitasking's a myth. It's not a myth. I'm really good at it, but that's what drives me into anxiety land. It's the more things I have to juggle, the more anxious I become in that spiral, that downward spiral that I can't get out of. I get triggered by everything. So it's not that it's not, what you're saying isn't true. It's not that it's a myth. It's that it's really dangerous and destructive to be able to do it really well.
There's too many things going on. It's like you just need to pull it back. And I've spoken to you offline, Sarah, the same thing. You and I both get to the point in our weekly lives where we go, we have to start saying no to things. There's too many things going on. We're too busy. Like it builds up, and this is, and then you just go, I have to start saying no, because you have to actually start penciling in downtime.
Free time.
Doing nothing.
Recovery time.
So, all right, maybe not a myth, but at least
Jennifer,
just not ideal.
Yeah, not ideal at all. And how do you manage your downtime? Do you program downtime in, or are you constantly swept away by your creative energy?
Downtime is forced upon me through my consistent burnout cycle.
Right.
So I mentioned before, I go through stages of hyperproductivity and then I'll burn out. And the burnout happens because when I have a good day, I don't know how many of them I'm going to have.
Yeah.
And I have to get all the stuff done, because if I don't, then I can't make any progress.
And then the down comes, and then you have to wait until you can haul yourself out of it again.
Yeah.
Is there any way you've found that you can break that cycle? Are you on the brink of discovering how to break that cycle, or are you still trapped in this cycle?
The only way for me to break the cycle is to not teach. And I've realized this through the work schedule I am able to maintain throughout the school holidays when I don't have to teach.
Okay, so you are disciplined.
Yeah.
You are disciplined when you don't have the extra burden of the money earning stuff. Yeah, okay, because that's what I was going to ask you. Is there any way you can be more disciplined with the creative stuff, like put a stop to that, and be less drained by the teaching? Because I'm much older than you probably. I have found that the older I get, the less draining teaching is. Teaching has become quite exhilarating and uplifting, but 20 years ago it was a huge drain because I wasn't very good at it. Instead of repeating what I knew was going to work, I was experimenting with all different ways of trying to get things to work. So if you can manage it, don't give up on it too much. Try and find ways to make it less draining. I don't know if that's any good advice to you whatsoever, but
I appreciate it. Sorry to butt in, but like from my point of view when it comes to teaching, and this kind of goes to collaborating with other people and being involved in things. I find anything where the other person isn't equally as enthused to just completely wipe me out.
I know what you're saying. With teaching, it's really hard when you've got to, like, I want to give so much to these students, but if I can just tell that they're there because they're forced to be there, it's like, it can be downer. But I found personally, I had to walk away from making my money right now in music so that I could pursue music.
In the most positive way.
And for me personally, and with last year and COVID and lockdown, I just burnt out from teaching. It was exceptionally difficult for me to teach online, especially babies. And I just went, for my own sake, I had to make that call, and I'll go back to teaching. I still love it, but I had to get creative and think differently as far as income, and then what I want to do with music, and that's something that each of us have to sort of figure out. And I think, Sarah, because you've got MSO, teaching for you is different. Would you say?
Just to briefly talk about me instead of Jennifer for 2 seconds. I have put all my spare money that I've got from the MSO into my projects. Now, I don't write music or anything, but I commission other people to write music for my show, my contemporary show. The burnout there was that sometimes Melbourne Symphony Orchestra repertoire is really hard. It's really, really, really hard.
John Adams.
So if you don't put extra time outside of those MSO hours into that MSO activity, then you will do a terrible job at work, and that's when it becomes really draining. So the only problem with my life is the overload, as Annabel, I never say no. New student, hey, everyone, but by the way, everyone's listening, yep, I'll take on a new student. I mean, I'm insane. So I have a discipline problem in saying no. But I did want to bring it back to you and ask you, what is the thing that people most misunderstand about you because you appear to be functioning? What is the thing that comes up over and over again when you're interacting with people? If anything, there might not be anything. You might think people are great.
It's that I can do things. I feel like I perform a productive person quite well. But then when I talk about, I can't do the admin, I can't do the application, I can't do my practice, people just look at me like, but what do you mean you can't do the thing? Like, doing the thing is the easiest thing in the world. Recently, it's been I can't go to that event because I am getting deep here. I am struggling to leave the house, not because of COVID anxiety, just because of the anxiety of the amount of time it takes to go anywhere and how that takes away from my practice time or the energy that I will have to practice. That's a tricky one. And the advice a lot of contemporary musicians give when you're like, how do I build a career? How do I get into these spaces I want to be in? They say, go to events. Talk to people.
Network.
I can't do that. I can't do it.
You need a wing girl. You need Annabel or I to take you to these parties and talk for you.
Yeah, why do you guys live in Melbourne? How rude.
Just come to Melbourne. Gosh.
I drag people everywhere, whether they like it or not. Like, just come. Just come to Melbourne. That's the thing. Come to Melbourne. That's what I tell everybody who's not here. Because it's fun.
Okay, so look, I really appreciate you coming and talking to us. You know, we don't know you, you don't know us, but your music is absolutely beautiful. I encourage everyone out there to have a listen.
Thank you.
To the Emerald Ruby and all the associated other things that you do, the fashion. Annabel, is there any last questions you want to ask Jennifer? Or
just that you're going to have to come back for part 2, because this has been like delightfully different from what we rant and rave about. I've done more listening than I have crapping on about stuff.
Thank you.
That's unusual for us, Jennifer. We usually talk over our guests. So.
Yeah, so, you know, I want to link everything that you want linked to Patreon, to YouTube, to Bandcamp.
Yep.
I want to invite you back maybe in a few months' time, check in, see how you're doing, any new projects.
We should
you've got
delve
going
more
on.
deeply into this personality type that you have, which a lot of other people out there will relate to.
And I'd like, you know, you definitely reached out to us as well, Jen, but I'd like to continue the conversation. I think this this notion of, well, what you said about you're high functioning and perceived as okay when people aren't okay, and we want to bring that to the forefront. I'm really happy if you'd like to come back and keep talking about this. Just keep, like, if the conversation's not already started, let's start it and then keep it going.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I'm totally down with that. I think it's been really, really great. I think you're incredibly interesting. I love your outfit.
Thank you. I just want to point out, I made these pants last night, and they also have this lovely little lace trim that you couldn't see before.
That is beautiful. Wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Clothing line.
Thank you so much for coming on. But you're going to have to already, we'll book in for you coming back.
Yeah, part 2.
Part 2.
See you next time.
Lovely.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer.
Thank you.